wanted to make a quick tutorial on how I UV objects in response to the overwhelming amount of people who have asked for a tutorial after that last post. So here we go. So the first thing I'm going to do if I'm UVing is I'm going to assign a material. So I'm going to select my mesh, come over to the material editor, add a new material. I'd probably name it, but in this case it doesn't matter. I'm going to add a new image, and then I'm going to add a new one here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll do something like 2048 for resolution. I'm going to call it UV, and I'm going to set it to be a color grid and hit OK. Once I have that, I'm going to grab the screen and the bolts here, and then I'm going to select the original mesh with the material, hit Control L, and then go to Link Materials and hit Enter. It's going to apply that material to all of the meshes now. If I open up the UVs for this mesh, it's not going to look too pretty right now. So what I'm going to want to do is, and in general, when you're UVing, you're going to want to go to any 90-degree angle change. So from this inset portion to this upper portion here, you're going to want to add seams in these spots. So I'll go ahead and just click in a bunch of spots here, and then right click and go Mark Seam. And then I'm also going to do the same thing right here. So now these two are marked seam, and I'm going to hit L on this, and it's going to grab anything within the area that's within that seam. I'm going to right click and hit Unwrap, and you can see that's going to kind of try to fold that down as best as possible. And that's what UVs do. They fold down 3D space so that we can apply textures to it. So we can see some warping here. So what I'll do is I'm going to add what's called relief cuts. So I'm going to grab this edge here, and this one. And I'll do the same thing on the opposite side. Come back into the 3D viewport, right click and hit Mark Seam. Go back to face mode and grab that entire section, unwrap it again. And now you can see that the faces are unwrapping perfectly. The same thing is going to need to be done here as well. If I unwrap this spot, you can see there's a lot of warping happening here. So I would just come back to the UVs, start selecting here, and I'm just going to grab each of these edges and come back into 3D viewport, right click, Mark Seam, and unwrap again, and then now that warping's gone too. So it's a really kind of just a repetitive process for UVs. You're really just kind of adding in those relief cuts where you need them, and then in general just kind of applying those cuts in spaces that are a 90-degree change. So in these corners, for example, but I like to leave some stuff attached as well. What you can do as well is switch into a side view. I'm going to go into vertex mode, grab all the back verts, rotate back. I'll turn X-ray mode off and hit 3. That's going to turn it to a face selection, and then I'm going to unwrap that selection. Then I'll go UV, and I'm going to go seams from islands, and now it's going to add in a UV seam to anything that was on the extents of that selection I had. With all my seams in for this object here, I'm just going to go ahead and go into edit mode, hit A, and then I'm going to right click and hit unwrap in the UV editor. And now you can see that the UV grid is going across this mesh perfectly. So this is what we're looking for here. You can see 90-degree angle changes is where I've placed cuts here on these spots as well. And then I also had to place cuts here, and it unfolds pretty nicely. Next, I'm going to do the UVs for these bolts. So I'll go into edit mode, and I'm just going to hit Shift C to go into X-ray, select one of them, hit Control I and delete the rest so that I only have to UV once. Now I'll hit Shift H to hide everything else. Whenever you're UVing a cylindrical object, you'll basically just have to cut the top of the object off, and then you'll want to add in a seam down here or at any hidden portion of the cylinder so that this other part of it can unwrap properly. I'll just do Mark Seam at that point, and then I'm going to go ahead and grab this inner portion, and I'm going to add these kind of relief cuts preemptively here because I know it's going to unwrap properly with them. So I'll Mark Seam, grab the whole thing and unwrap it, and there you go. I'll hit Alt H to stop hiding that. Now I'm going to add a mirror modifier, so I'll just type in mirror, and it's going to mirror on the X already, and I'll just hit Y as well, and now it's mirroring across the object. Next, I'll hit Convert To and Mesh, and now if I unwrap all of these, I have unique spots for each of these UVs, but I didn't have to UV it 4 times over. Lastly, I'm going to go ahead and UV the screen, and for something planar, it's very simple. I'm just going to select the entire object and hit Unwrap, And for most planar things, they'll unwrap super simply without any seams needed. So those are the best shapes to unwrap. Once you have your entire UVs done, what we're going to do is we're going to want to pack this into the UV space. So I'm going to just hit A to select everything, and I'm going to hit Shift A to apply scaling. Then I'm going to tab into edit mode so I can see the UVs. I'm going to go to the UV tab, and I'm going to go average island scales to average all their scale. And then I'm going to go UV and pack islands and hit OK. And now all my UVs are packed into that 0 to 1 space and everything's been UV'd properly.